Okay, today we're going to solve a radical equation. We're going to solve this equation, the square root of x plus 2 plus x equals 4. And the first thing I'm going to do, well, the first thing I'm going to point out is that the x is on the outside of the radical. Notice how I wrote that with the x on the outside of the radical. I made it clear. And the first thing I want to do is isolate the radical. Well, that means I'm going to subtract x from each side of the equation, and then on the left side I'm left with the square root of x plus 2, and on the right side I'm left with 4 minus x. Feel free to rewrite that as negative x plus 4. If you did write it that way, that's the same thing, realize. So then, the next thing I'm going to do, since I do have the radical isolated, then I'm going to square both sides of the equation. That means the left side I'm left with x plus 2, and on the right side I have 4 minus x squared. I recommend writing it that way instead of immediately trying to square it. That way it might be easier to see what's going on. So then, at this point, I'm also going to rewrite this as 4 minus x times 4 minus x. To remind myself not to just distribute the 2, but actually double distribute and multiply all of these out. The left side is still x plus 2, still here as well. And then here, I'm going to multiply out, double distribute, whatever you want to call it. 4 times 4 is 16, then minus 4x plus x squared. I know some of you like to skip this step, and that's okay if you do. But for some of you, I know you like to see this written out that way. And then I'll combine like terms, 16 minus 8x plus x squared. And again, the left side is still the same. So that's x plus 2. And then what I'd like to do is get a 0 on one side of the equation, which I always like to do anytime I have a quadratic equation. I like to have a 0 on one side of the equation. That means I'm going to subtract x and subtract 2 from each side of the equation. Now how I'm going to write it is subtract x minus 2. I like to write them below their like terms. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. And then in the next step, this is 0 on the left side of the equation. And then on the right side, we're left with 14 minus 9x plus x squared. Then, the next thing I'm going to do, this is another preference that I have that maybe you don't want to do, but what I like to do is write my trinomials in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. So I'm going to rewrite this as 0 equals x squared minus 9x plus 14. That way it's easier to tell what's A, what's B, what's C. Maybe that's helpful, maybe not. Realize here we can actually factor. This is factorable. Notice A is just 1 here, and so what we're looking for is two numbers that multiply to give us 14 that add to give us negative 9. Well, those two numbers are negative 7 and negative 2, so this factors as x minus 7 times x plus 2. Sorry, minus 2. X minus 7, x minus 2. When we multiply two negatives, we get a positive, so we get positive 14. And when we add them, we should still get negative 9. Well then, this gives us two solutions. X equals 7 and x equals 2. Well then, what you have to do is check these answers. Anytime you have a radical equation, it's really, really important to check your answers. Although you should always check your answers. But here, it's extra important, and you'll see why. So first, let's check x equals 7. When we plug 7 into the equation, I'm going to go back to the very original equation, and then that would be the square root of 7 plus 2 plus 7. And we want to know, does that equal 4? Okay, well, 7 plus 2 is 9, so that would be the square root of 9 plus 7. Square root of 9 is 3. That's 3 plus 7 and that equals 10. That does not equal 4. So actually, even though it looked like 7 was a solution, it's not, and we call that an extraneous solution. So that's an extraneous solution. Now let's check to see if 2 is a correct answer. We're hoping at least one of these is a correct answer. So we're checking, and then I'm going to plug back into the equation. So square root of 2 plus 2 plus 2 on the outside, and we want to know, does that equal 4? Well, 2 plus 2 is 4, so this would be the square root of 4 plus 2. The square root of 4 is 2, and 2 plus 2 is 4. So this actually does check out. In other words, 2 is our answer, and it turns out 2 is our only answer. So even though we came up with 2 numbers, we end up with just one solution.